to another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric, a special edition. I am in the process of scouring a fleece. It is some fleece that I purchased before my move to Virginia, so well over 5 years ago, probably 6 or 7 years ago. I purchased it from the Woolery as opposed to going to a fiber fair. And it is, I purchased somewhere between 3 to 4 pounds. I can't remember if I've already spun some of this up, but I have 3 pounds of this. It is a Targee Debouillet cross fleece. There, that's out there. So I decided yesterday I wanted to spin some of this fleece for a project that I'm working on. And I grabbed it, thought, well, it's been cleaned. It's clearly been washed because this is not how fleece, this is not how wool comes off of a sheep's back, okay? And so I figured it's been washed. I will just pull it apart, flick it, open it up, fluff it up, and then I'll spin it. But as soon as I started doing this with a few clumps, I realized I could feel a lot of lanolin on my hands. So I realized that, well, yes, this is a beautiful, beautiful fiber, and I could spin it. There we go. I could spin it just as it is. It's got just a touch more lanolin in it than I want to do for this project. I may end up using a drum carder and carding some of it. The amount of lanolin with this shouldn't be a problem. But if there are deeper pockets, if there are a few heavier areas of lanolin, it'll make things a little gummy. It's not going to make it as stress-free a spin as I'm looking for right now. So beautiful fiber, but it needs to get a little more lanolin removed from it. So I've been working on, thus the frizzy hair, the coming to you in a little bit more of a chaotic state, that probably redness of my cheeks. I've decided to make this video while I have been scouring the fleece. And this is some of the earliest stuff that I scoured today, and it drafts apart much easier. It's a lighter and fluffier. Definitely a difference. Let's see, where did I just there? So I don't think the camera is going to be able to show the difference. So by sight, you may not be able to see, but this is cloud light, whereas this does stick to my hand a little bit more. That's the main difference. The lanolin left in this is making, it's moisturizing my hands quite a bit, but it's just a little too much for me to really have just, well, I'll show that. See how that just drafts apart beautifully. It pulls apart beautifully. Whereas the unwashed, you might even be able to hear it. It sticks together. So it was close to being ready, but it wasn't enough ready for what I wanted to do to it today. So as I was getting everything ready and starting my process today on scouring this fleece, I thought to myself, well, I'm not sure I've actually ever spun Targee. I know I've spun Debouillet. I know I've spun Rambouillet. But I've never spun Targee, because I think when I originally bought this, I bought the 3 pounds of the Targee Debouillet, and then I bought some other stuff that I've now since spun. And the reason I'm thinking that is because it fits in the bucket really well. I don't remember actually spinning Targee or talking about Targee at any point in the past. And I think I would have purchased about 3 pounds, because when you wash your fiber, you will lose some of the weight from removing the lanolin and any dirt, etc. From it. And I wanted to make sure I had enough that if I was making the sweaters that I was making at that time, that I'd have enough. And 2 pounds is a good amount for my shawls and my sweaters. So I probably just bought the 3 pounds of this. Either way, as I sat down, as I got everything ready, I decided to sit down as the fleece was washing. I pulled out my Fleece and Fiber source book, and I started looking up Targee. And I was delighted, and that's what I wanted to make this short video about. Not so much as the scouring the fleece, but talking about the specific fleece that I'm working with. And so I looked it up, and it says here that Targee was developed in the United States back in the early 1920s. That it was developed from taking Rambouillet rams and breeding them with Corriedale and with Lincoln Rambouillet ewes. So a Lincoln cross Rambouillet ewe and a Corriedale ewe. And it was designed specifically to thrive in the western high plains, the Intermountain west of the Continental Divide. The Idaho, northern Utah, Wyoming. So west of the Continental Divide, the Rocky Mountains, the Intermountain West, you might say. And that's where, oops, sorry to bump my camera and bump it again. That's where I'm from. That's where I grew up, is in northern Utah. So I was just tickled when I read that this breed of sheep was developed to do well in that part of the world. So when I started looking at the Targee, I was like, all right, so it comes from Rambouillet, Corriedale, and Lincoln. So of course, that meant I needed to flip around and take a look at those characteristics of those lambs. So I already know from having worked with Lincoln before, Lincoln is a long wool, beautiful, beautiful animals. You can find on the internet lots of beautiful pictures of these long wool sheep. So they clearly wanted to have, by crossing these breeds, the fine, microfine fibers of the Rambouillet with something with a longer staple length. I should mention, before I go any further, that with sheep breeds, you have your meat sheep, you have your fleece sheep, and you have your dairy sheep, your milk-producing sheep. And each one of those categories of sheep have their own characteristics and are bred to enhance, to get the most out of it. Well, definitely looking at the Lincoln sheep, you have some really long locks, but their wool is a bit coarser. And while it has purpose, especially traditionally, it's not necessarily next to skin soft. Whereas Rambouillet, on the other hand, and I love the story of the Rambouillet. So officially, according to this book, in the late 1700s, Spain began allowing merinos to go outside of Spain, and they sold some to the French, and the French then created and crossbred and created the Rambouillet sheep. But I've heard a myth that I wanted to share with you on the Rambouillet. I heard that back in the days in which Spain was very possessive of its high quality, soft fiber sheep wool, the merino, that Spain, the Spanish king did not want them getting out of the country, didn't want anyone competing with them. Wool was the currency, the big industrial product. It was the money of the especially the pre-Renaissance. The Renaissance came out of the wool, the industrialization of spinning and weaving and all of that, the markets and the ability to clothe more people. It's all intertwined. The earliest industrial revolution, you might say, is when the spinning and weaving and the textiles went from cottage to more mass-produced in the early, and it led to the Renaissance. The monies that were being generated out of the wool production, the wool fabric production, it clothed the world. It changed the world. So this Spanish king wouldn't have wanted their prize merinos to be developed anywhere else. It was a huge money maker for them. So the myth that I've heard, and I don't know how much truth there is to it and how much is myth, but they said that the Spanish king gave to the French king some merinos as a gift. And maybe that's what happened in 1786. I don't know. But then he regretted his decision. But by that point, in order to, in essence, you're not going to get any more. Your breeding stock isn't going to increase. And so we're not going to let you have any more. We're going to stop it. You have what you're going to get, and that's it. So, of course, you want to bring in other breeding stock in order to keep your flock healthy. And Rambouillet came out of that endeavor. So it makes me chuckle because we live in a time in which corporate espionage and corporate, cutthroat business and trying to, protect our patents and be the first one to have this or have the monopoly on something. And here you have a sheep breed that was so sought after that one way or another, that sheep was going to make it to France, but rather than it being a merino, it is now a Rambouillet. And so, whether or not it has a lot of characteristic difference from the merino of its age, I don't know. It's been a few hundred years and things change. So you're going to have some differences. Just the region and such will make a difference. But I always chuckle when I run into Rambouillet because I always say Rambouillet is the French version of the merino. So taking that Rambouillet back in the early 1900s and then crossbreeding it with the Lincoln and crossbreeding it with the Corriedale in order to take advantage of the features those sheep bring to an animal is how we get the Targee. And that also brings me to the Corriedale. So when I've done some different reading about spinning group studies and looking at Corriedale, one of the things that I have run into is that there is a difference between the Corriedale in the United States and the Corriedale that is in, say, Australia, where Corriedale came from. So I looked up Corriedale, and yet, not Australia, my apology. Corriedale from New Zealand. So, in the 1880s, the Corriedale was developed in New Zealand, and it was developed from the merinos of the area, and it said, at the time, merinos, a breed suited for arid grasslands, and Romneys, which adapted for lush, rich pastures, were the dominant breeds in New Zealand and Australia. But both countries had large swaths of intermediate grasslands, areas similar to Kansas and Nebraska in the United States or Saskatchewan in Canada. So for the people in the United States, if you're familiar with those areas, that's the kind of areas. So breeders sought a dual-purpose sheep that would perform well in these transition areas. And this guy named James Little, manager of a ranch called Corriedale, is credited with being instrumental in the breed's development. Little crossed Lincolns and perhaps some Leicesters with merinos until he had a stable breeding population. And then Corriedales were imported into the United States, into Laramie, Wyoming. So, over in New Zealand, a guy said, okay, well, we have breeds of sheep that live off this land. We have breeds of sheep that live off this land, but I have land that's in between. Let's create a breed of sheep a dual breed, meat and fleece, that does well on my land. Oh yeah, and my land is not so different from lands in these areas of the United States. So yeah, it'll be popular and it'll spread. So you will have a difference between the New Zealand Corriedale and the U.S. Corriedale simply by who we are crossbreeding or enhancing our flocks with over the last 100+ years of breeding. So long story short, somebody said, hey, this is really great sheep. This is a really great sheep, but I need something in the middle, and Corriedale. And for anyone who has heard me talk in my other videos about, I have used Corriedale before. I have knit up a sweater for my daughter. I love the stuff, at least the stuff that is US based. And yes, I bought my Corriedale from probably breeders in the Laramie, Wyoming area. Oh, love the stuff. It puffs up and blooms. It's soft. It's wonderful. It doesn't, I shouldn't say bloom. Bloom is when you get the furries on it. It puffs up. When I spin it and then I set the twist, it's like a puff ball. It goes poop, and it gets airy and light, and it has fabulous insulating properties, fabulous to spin, a real joy. And I've spun Corriedale and I've spun Corriedale Lincoln crosses. So longer staple length, still next to skin softness. Oh, love them both. So if you have an opportunity to get a hold of those, give them a try. So we've talked about of the Targee, the Rambouillet, and the Corriedale, and the Lincoln that all went into creating the Targee. But the specific fleece that I have has one more piece to add to the puzzle, and it's a Targee Debouillet cross. So I looked up to refresh my memory as to what Debouillet was. And Debouillet, as it says here in the book, it says it hails from New Mexico. So my Targee, which is in the Idaho part of the Rocky Mountain West, okay, and now New Mexico, which is in the southern part of the Rocky Mountain West, is what's combined for this specific fleece. So the Debouillet was bred and developed in the 1920s as well, but in New Mexico. So a different type of dry, arid grassland than what you would have up in Idaho, Wyoming, northern Utah. You would have down in New Mexico. And so this was, this breed was developed by taking a variety of merinos and breeding them, let's see, they're saying, and breeding them with the Rambouillet, but specifically with the intent of having it handle the southwestern conditions. So this was really, again, kind of like the guy in New Zealand who says, hey, this is my ranch land. Let me develop a breed that works well on it. Well, down in New Mexico, you have a guy named Amos D. Jones who says, okay, here's my ranch land. Let me combine the Rambouillet and the merinos that we have and create a sheep that works well for the arid southwestern area, okay? It is a fiber that is known for its long staple length and very fine micron. So that's your Debouillet. And I think the reason they call it Debouillet is because it's from the Delane merinos coupled with the Rambouillet. Go figure. So my specific fleece has a lot of Rambouillet ancestry to it, with a little bit of Coriadel and Lincoln. And that's what we have created. So Targee, Debouillet, cross. And that's what I'm going to be spinning. Now, a couple of the things that, you know, every animal is a little different. I would say this is not necessarily a very long staple length, but it's not exactly short either, okay? This is going to be real. I could definitely spin it right from the lock very easily. I probably will card it a little. It is just, look at it, is so, let me find the camera. There we go. So lovely and fine. It's so next to skin soft. It is going to, I can already tell just looking at it, it is going to react very much like the Rambouillets that I have spun. And yeah, it's going to knit up and be a soft fiber, or I think I want to actually make a crochet. I'm specifically making a crochet yarn out of some of this, but it should be soft, have a sponginess to it. There's a definite sponginess to this woolly fiber. And while it doesn't have the long locks that I have done before when I've had more Coriadel, or definitely the Coriadel Lincoln, it has a lot of the same characteristics that I saw in some of the Rambouillet I've spun. So, of course, whenever you crossbreed animals, you get different characteristics that come to the forefront, especially if it's hobby breeders that are creating these. But either way, it will be a lovely spin. And I'm looking forward to the project. So, if you do not have this book and you are into spinning or just into the history of sheep, I would really recommend it. I am not promoted to say this. I just know I pull it out, especially when I'm trying a new fiber. I like to know where it comes from. I like the stories. In this case, it amuses me to no end to read these stories of how they've created and bred the sheep to meet the needs of the people, to meet the needs of the areas they're in. So, yeah, it's very fun to work with conservation breeds. It's fun to work with historical breeds that haven't been crossbred like crazy. It's fun to just try different types of fiber. And for me, this has been a fun way to give myself a little bit of a break from the scouring of the lanolin off of the fiber today. So this was an impromptu video. A little bit of unwinding with fiber and fabric, not my normal, having really thought about it ahead of time. Still a little bit of rambling, but I wanted to do this because while I am still working on getting ready to talk about Tour de Fleece and share my Tour de Fleece goals, I had a special spin that I wanted to do, and I decided this was the fiber to do with it. I will talk about that, the Tour de Fleece, my special spin, all of that in my next video, which may be coming out this upcoming week. But I thought I'd just quickly throw this together, pop it up onto YouTube, and share with you my Targee Debouillet scouring day. Rather than doing housework any day, I would rather play with fleece. So, until my next video, which will be talking about my Tour de Fleece fiber, and we'll talk about what I'm doing and why I chose to pull this and why I'm chuckling so much about this specific fleece, because I'm preparing a spin for somebody that it makes me smile because they're also from that Intermountain West area that that these sheep have, that the Targee was bred for. So until my next video, which is the more scheduled, I hope you enjoyed this impromptu unwinding with fiber and fabric. Until then, have a wonderful